He says in John chapter 5, verse 39 to the Pharisees, the teachers of the Old Testament, he says, "You search the scriptures because you think in them you have life, but you have failed to come to me." He says, all the scriptures are pointing towards me. In Luke 24, after he rose from the dead, he's walking along the road talking to some disciples. And then he says that he opens up the scriptures to them and shows how the law, the prophets, the Psalms, they're all pointing towards him. And I began to think, well, what does that really mean? Does that mean that there's like 3 Old Testament references to Jesus? Or does it mean that all of the Bible is pointing us towards the final completion of Jesus Christ? I've come to be convinced that it is. That as we're going to see here, the author of Hebrews quotes stuff about earthly kings. And he points it towards Jesus. He says, just as much as this is true of an earthly king, more than that, in the deepest and fullest level, we see this comes to completion in Jesus. Jesus is truly the Son of God. Jesus is truly the great priest. Jesus is truly the King of Kings. Jesus is truly the true prophet. And so I encourage us, as we look at the Old Testament, to read it with Christian lenses on, to see what does this tell us? What does this point us towards? What lack is there in here that Jesus comes to complete? What hero in here do we see that pales in comparison to Jesus? What failure in here is met by Jesus? I encourage us to read the Old Testament as the author of Hebrews reads the Old Testament, as being a book that constantly points us towards Jesus. Not a collection of Aesop's fables that we read, we get a little heartwarming message from it, and then move on. But it's pointing us towards our greatest need, which is Jesus. I wasn't supposed to talk that long about that. Even in my notes, I wrote, "Don't talk too long about that, Mike." I just get excited about it.